Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, and we are once again presenting our podcast, Talking Movies with Professor O, and Professor O is with us. How you doing, Professor?
Oh, doing great. Direct from Trinity College. Yeah, because these films recognize the importance of a university education. I will say that. That is a theme in these films.
Now, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. We're going to talk about two films that featured Charlton Heston. One is The Omega Man, and the other is Soylent Green. They were done in the early 70s, and both of them deal with a dystopian future. And so we're going to talk about how each of these films treat their dystopias differently and what they have in common besides Charlton Heston and Lincoln Kilpatrick, who plays a priest in both of them for some reason. But
Ah, I missed that. Yeah,
yeah,
what's the actor's name again that played the priest?
Lincoln Kilpatrick. He plays
Right.
Zachary in The Omega Man, and he plays the priest in Soylent Green. So
Oh,
from
and a
one film to
good,
the other, he loses a name for a character, but
but
that happens.
but a good part. You kind of remember his
Yeah,
sense in both films. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
what a pair of films.
So why
Uh,
don't we start? Why don't we start with the Omega Man because that was the earlier film that was done in 1971 and directed by I'm Fleischer. Doggone.
Fleischer did Soviet Green, and the Omega Man just is so arresting from both films in some respects set the table beautifully, and
Yes,
the Omega Man sets the table with um, the sense of you just start off and it, and it's just incredibly quiet. Fact is, I'm hard of hearing, and so I was thinking, "Whoa, where's the volume?" And until finally you get some sound from the movie, a diegetic sound we call it from the
yeah.
movie, like a door creaking, and I realized, oh, there's nobody around, and it just beautifully done in the
They
the
created that very well, and it's interesting about that is that when they couldn't afford to build sets of a city with no people in it. But oddly enough, they found that on the weekends, the shopping district in Los Angeles doesn't have any shoppers, and so they filmed the exteriors there on weekends, and so it's actual part of Los Angeles that they were filming in. A lot of the buildings that you see in it, of course, are still standing. Some of them are even the same business,
yeah,
but
you really couldn't do this like Blade Runner.
no, no, you couldn't.
Yeah, like using an old school Hollywood set, and it's funny. You're right about the time of this thing, 71. That by then moving into the age of new Hollywood, moving past classic Hollywood, and classic Hollywood, incredible things about classic Hollywood, but we were so used to those sets and those sets being redressed, for this movie needed that sense of reality. It needed being shot in downtown LA, where those wide sets just would not. Oh, existing
That's
sets
true.
just would not work, and it just incredible. And then you get Heston driving that. He always chose convertibles,
Yeah,
and fast Fords. As
that's
he,
very
and,
true.
yeah, and of course it's about it's based on the Richard Matheson book I Am Legend, which was first made. Apparently, the
Yeah,
film that's closest to this film was The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, made
right.
in like 65 maybe.
I
That
believe
is
so.
that's an amazing film. It's just Vincent Price matter of factly just goes around with a wooden stake, finds vampires in the daytime, and then burns them. And that's he. And he's a scientist. His version of science is to find out what actually causes vampires. He's not going to accept a supernatural
Yeah,
the solution. And so that's where you get the science. But then, of course, for this film, they got rid of the vampires completely, and
Well,
made
in
them.
fact, Heston didn't even know about the previous film. It must have been a B picture, which a lot of Vincent
So,
Price films were,
right.
and so they wanted to do this because of this whole concept of last man on Earth. Heston was very taken by that idea, and I have to say that I have fantasized about this myself, haven't you? That
Oh yeah.
maybe you wake up one day and you're the only person on Earth. What do you do?
Right.
And in his case, of course, he's not the only human on Earth, but he's certainly outnumbered by the people they call the family, which are mutated in one way or the other. Now, they had names for them, I think, in the movie that Will Smith did years later. But this
Right.
whole idea of being able to just walk into a store, take a shirt off the hanger, and put it on was something that just kind of tickled Heston's fancy on this.
Right, right. And apparently he even has, so yeah, Last Man on Earth, there's a biological there's really an interesting part to the film. You get Russia and China were go to war, which was a real
Yes,
thing back in the late 60s. We forget about that. But they
right.
were, in the late 40s, they were the best of friends. The communists taking over the world, the Marxist nations, communist nations taking over the world, best of friends. And but then by the late 60s, well, I think the communist Chinese called the Russians that they were too accommodating to the West,
Yeah.
using too much capital. And of course, that's during the Cultural Revolution, and Mao is not accommodating to anybody. And he sends. It's interesting. He sends his scientists and people with education off into the fields to do manual labor. It's a little bit like Pol Pot in Cambodia, but
Hmm.
but by the late 60s, you get those nations basically in real life having skirmishes, and India's kind of in the middle of that, unfortunately, just because of where they are. And but then this film takes that into a full blown war. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like that part of the unleashing of the biological weapons was the it feels because it happens kind of fast when Anthony Zerbe is the
Yes,
newscaster at the beginning of the film,
right.
and it feels like one of our missiles. There's like a thought that if 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 one of our missiles breaks into the encasement of the this is confusing, but
Yeah.
that apparently there is a weapon with a biological weapon, and we're worried that maybe the shards of one of our weapons is going to break that, and all of a sudden we get a biological rain. I was a long way of looking at that, but what did you think of that,
Well,
Professor B?
it was one of the problems we were talking before we went on about some of the criticism between Leonard Maltin and Hollowell's on how the narrative on this is kind of garbled, and
Right.
I think really because of that, the audience would just take what they already think about China. Yeah, they would do germ warfare against us, and
Yeah.
it would kill most of us and leave the rest of us as zombies or something. And that's the zombie kick came many years later, but
And you're
they have mutants, and then they have just about everybody else gone. So I mean, the population of the Earth, which went from however big it was at that time to a few thousand is what we're left with in the beginning of the story. So I think that this gives Heston the impetus to do what he did. In that, as soon as he found anybody that was like him, it was a cause.
Right, right, right. And the way you explained it too was, yeah, we could conceive of the Chinese having some sort of chemical weapons, and also that audience would have known that everybody was experimenting with chemical
Sure.
weapons at the time. We would have had them, but somehow in this war they get unleashed. But I hadn't thought about it. I just kind of went with. I was enjoying Anthony Zerbe as the newscaster, and I just kind of went with the kind of loose explanation. But you're right, there's a lot in there. Some people just flat out choke and die, like the helicopter pilot that's
Yeah.
that's flying, and then other people turn into some sort of zombies and become part of. Yeah.
Well, there's some efficiency in this in filmmaking, especially if you're doing a nuclear holocaust film. You've got to bomb out buildings and things like that, and that was easier to film in the late 40s when there actually were bombed out buildings. But if you wait until the 70s, it would be a whole lot more expensive. So let's make it a germ warfare instead of nuclear, but have basically the same after effects of it. You have people who are mostly dead, and you have people who are mutated.
That is a great point. Where you're, and then all you got to do is it did. I know it costs some money with the permits and dealing with just their limited window of time to shoot on weekends, but still it was way less expensive to use just take existing buildings and hollow them out. And make a set, make it Charlton Heston's the one set that's got a lot like a James Bond set is Charlton Heston's apartment.
Yeah,
Um,
and
Apparently,
they did actually build that one
right.
on the back lot at I think Warner Brothers had the back lot at the time. Was this Warner Brothers? Um,
Yes.
yeah, they did have one on their back lot, and so that was at which that set was still standing until about 2003, and then they tore that
Oh.
down. But that was
And they
his.
integrated, they integrated that beautifully into the film,
Yeah,
into the existing LA, real life. Especially with the searchlights and the fountain, it just kind of works. That you don't think, like, oh, okay, now we're going to the backlot set. Instead, it just, which is really what they were trying to avoid. It all works beautifully together. Well,
yeah,
you mentioned saving money. I hadn't thought of this. I was the third film that I'm glad we left off. It was the Planet of the Apes. You could look at another Charlton Heston, but
yeah.
apparently the script, Rod Serling was working on that script, and he wanted to set it in the future, build it like a Logan's Run type of future or a Blade Runner type of future, but it was so expensive. They said, let's have it do a planet where the apes are in kind of a that their
Parallel
version
universe.
version
Yeah,
of the future. Say it again,
parallel
Professor.
universe.
Yeah, parallel universe, but it's not a lot of modern structures or cars that float.
Yeah.
Instead, it's kind of like domes and cement domes and out there with and
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they had anyway electricity even, but it saved them a lot of money by doing that. Just like the different, instead of a nuclear holocaust, chemical weapons. That's but yeah,
Yeah.
and that kind of gets us into the plot of the film. Last Man on Earth. There's the antagonists are the family led by Anthony Zerbe,
Yeah.
who's just fantastic in the role. As great character actor. Role was perfect, just absolutely made for him. He's
I
got those
wasn't clear
eyes.
as to whether he was the same character as the newsman. Was he the newsman who mutated and started the family, or
I was assuming he was, but that's a good question.
would say
That
something
would
about media, of course. They'd round around the newscaster.
that's a good point. And then he's got the gravitas to pull the family together because he's got
Mhm.
that sense of being the newsman who knows a little bit more. That's an that's an interesting. But I think he's great in the role. Yeah, and just yeah, if exactly how everything takes place, and you get into the zombies, the family, but they're very much thinking. They're self-aware. They're totally
Yeah.
different than a lot of zombies in other films. Um, have kind of Anthony Zerbe is a little bit of a philosopher. Um,
Yeah.
uh, has some interesting things to say. There was an interesting line that talked about I've got it right here. It's just I had looked it up. It gets into another area of the Omega Man, which is really interesting. And it didn't. There was some. Well, anyway, let me just get this real quick.
Okay.
The family is a monolithic shadow, like the shadow for Luke. That kind of a Luke's shadow being Darth Vader.
Right. Right.
The family is a monolithic shadow to Neville, that Charlton Heston, his character is Neville, expressing deep seeded technological and racial anxieties. Neville represents science, civilization, and order. We see that in the film, whereas the family eschews these artifacts of society in lieu of destruction, religion, and mass identity. The conflict stems from the inherent polarity, but the superficial differences that kind of connect to these similarities. Primarily, it is the conflict between the majority and the minority, one trying to relegate the other into insignificance. Neville believes the family to be a bunch of disorganized lunatics in Halloween costumes. He dismisses them as vermin, and it's kind of a scary scene we need to we'll talk about. He dismisses them as vermin and makes light of their rampant destruction of educational, technological, and literary bastions. Matthias, that's the character that's Anthony Zerbe, he calls Neville obsolete and part of the dead. He is discarded and a refuge of the past. The irony of the family condemning Neville as part of the past is clear, even as Matthias accuses him. He does his accusing in a candlelit Gothic chamber with a wrought iron chandelier and pew seating, and the obedient masses sit like a congregation outfitted in flowing black robes like satanic monks. And and that's
Okay.
what that's and for Anthony Zerbe to be accusing, that's his family, and he's accusing Heston of being outdated, is a lot of irony there. But
Well, it is, but I think the whole point of all of this is that technology is what brought us into all this trouble,
right,
and so Heston, of course, is the representative of the technological society. He is he's highly educated. He's some kind of scientist, I think, and
right,
he has built this command center in his apartment where he has screens on everything, and his own generator. Although the stoplight still worked without power, if you noticed when he was driving down the street.
interesting.
But that was the problem of using actual locations. But anyway, the fact that he represents technology that has failed us, and the family saying, we go back to basics for thousands of years. We've been reading by candlelight. What was the matter with that?
Exactly. Going back to the basics, and yeah. So it's an interesting philosophy on the part of the family, and you can actually see the reasoning in light of what's happened to society, to blame everything on science and to say we've got to reject everything
Yeah.
connected to science.
Now they're all
And
trying to kill each other. I think that kind of gets lost here in our discussion. That the reason that Heston has all of this stuff is to defend himself. He locks himself at the top of this building that he always lived in, according to the narrative here. But his machine gunning them down is very much along the line of, if they didn't, they would all swarm him and kill him.
right, they're completely polarized. There is,
Yes.
and that was after these three movies, you can, especially these two that we're doing, you really can see how at the end of the day, Charlton Heston, I can see a place for that Second Amendment. We need those firearms.
I don't think they worried about it by then, but
But and of
I
course,
do
he
need.
became such a defender of the Second Amendment as.
He
But
was,
see,
yeah. But
but
I
that's
need to make a clarification. The director here was Boris Sagal. I mistakenly said it was Richard Fleischer. He did Soylent Green. We'll talk about later.
we
But
will get to that for sure.
yeah, he wanted
I
Orson.
wasn't familiar
He,
with Sagal's work, to tell you the truth.
no,
Fleischer is
he was not a very big director, I don't think, even at the time. And in fact, it seems that Heston wanted Orson Welles. And I don't really know. I really don't know why Orson Welles didn't take the job, because at that time in his career, he was doing commercials. He could very easily have taken that
yeah,
job.
and
Maybe
he
just
would
didn't
do
like Heston. I don't
commercials.
know.
He would do commercials and take the money to fund the movie he was working on with John Huston, The Other Side of the Wind. He would take that money. He would do, everything went. He would do the day job, and then and Orson Welles could have been a great Matthias. Whoa,
Oh yeah,
that would that's amazing. That's
but
amazing.
that would have been dangerous, because he would have stolen the film in the
Oh
same
yeah,
way
he
that he
would have
did
stolen the film.
in The Third Man. He was on for about 4 minutes of the entire
Right.
picture, which was the starring Joseph Cotton, and nobody remembers Joseph Cotton in The Third Man. It was all
No,
Orson Welles.
it's Orson Welles. I think I was reading a biography of him, and he went to he kept refusing to go to Vienna to film The Third Man. I think he went there for a total of a week tops. He was very picky, wanted to be well fed. They it just about came to a lawsuit, but he got his money. And at that time, he was making Othello, so he would take all his money from stuff, fluffy stuff. Like I think he knew The Third Man was a great film, but and he would argue, of course, with the director of The Third Man, and just but that director did not put up with him, and in turn made him. It's a good part. It's perfect for Orson Welles. But
maybe
yeah,
maybe his best performance, really.
oh yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. But he would have stolen. Yeah, he'd have been too hammy in this film in the Omega. There's a scene that an interesting. I know we're kind of popping around the way we do,
Yeah.
but there was the scene where it's an interesting scene because it reminded me when Charlton Heston um, calls and it calls. He's so polarized, like you were saying, just they're at each other's throats, but yet there's a cure for this. His blood turns out to be a cure because I think he's actually a biological scientist, and so he was working
Yeah.
on when everybody's desperately trying to find a vaccine for this plague, the chemical weapons plague. He actually comes up with one. It's experimental. He doesn't know if it's going to work, but after the helicopter crashes, he just what the heck, and he injects himself, and he's actually pure. His blood has been cleansed of the plague.
Mhm.
So they realize they can simply he can just when they extract his blood and put it into a transfusion to the brother of Rosalind Cash. I'm going with actors' names instead of the
Yeah, that's
character
fine.
name. But and so then that cures it at least stops and actually does reverse the plague, and he's fine. And the kid is so sympathetic. He says, let's take this to the family. Those poor people, he has a sense of empathy for them. These
Yeah.
poor people don't know what this is the bridge. And Heston just can't do it. And when he can't do it, he's very much, I mean, he is not, there's no, he says these people are vermin. These people are psychotic. There's
Yeah.
no future for them. We got to leave the place. And maybe he was leaving an open door later on, but the kid sees that as just mean spirited and cruel. And of course, then he runs off and goes off to the family. And of course, they kill him, which is just, the beginning of the end for the film. It's just,
Unfortunately.
yeah, yeah. But it's an interesting part that Heston can't overcome. Kind of, in a sense, there's some writing basically can't overcome his prejudice in against them, and yet the film is fascinating. We got the Rosalind Cash character. It's fascinating for really being progressive. I think one of the
Yeah.
first interracial kisses in
No,
the film.
not even close. Not even close. Actually, you'd have in the movies. You'd have to give
Oh,
that
you're
to
right.
oh goodness,
Harry Belafonte,
Harry
the devil.
Belafonte. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's
yeah,
exactly right. No, you're
and
exactly right.
and of course, Nichelle Nichols and William Shatner on
I,
television in
that's where I went
1967. So
off
I mean,
track.
yeah.
Exactly. That had occurred before
So
this film.
by 1971, an interracial kiss wasn't that big, but still having a romance it was different, and
Yeah.
they put it in basically to make a point that here the world's population is down to a few thousand, and most of them are not human, and so the differences between humans don't seem to make as much difference as the difference between humans and the family does.
I like the way you put that, and it also the other thing it kind of felt kind of ground. You're so right. It wasn't the first interracial kiss that goes back, but and I was kind of thinking channeling Star Trek too, where it was kind of funny where Kirk did not, where they were both kind of resisting that kiss. Here, it's kind of this is even though they're basically the last people on Earth, it's still there's kind of a maturity to it, and they really
Yeah.
kind of fell for each other. I mean, they really, I love the way she was saying, "I'm making my move now." I mean, they let it play out a little bit,
Yeah.
the romance between and kind of a budding romance. But the way you put that, you get the last people on Earth and the things maybe we're overcoming. What's interesting too is the family is kind of integrated in their own way. They are
Yeah.
basically, in some respects, they've overcome racism. They've become a new type of being,
Yes.
which is an interesting thing. A lot of
Interesting
interesting.
idea.
Yeah, yeah,
There's always what they call in business, they call it spillover benefits. If you have something that is unintentionally turns out pretty good.
right.
Just, but
Something with the family.
an interesting point I read that Rosalind Cash was concerned about this scene with Heston only because she said it felt strange to make love to Moses.
Yeah, exactly. It was to make that's exactly right. And and Charlton Heston himself. What's interesting, I think, probably a lot of our listeners, I'm thinking of near the end of his life, and his Second Amendment ads and the connecting to the NRA, the National Rifle Association. But
Yeah.
during the '60s, he was during the '60s he was very pro civil rights. He went to the March on Washington, was there with MLK. He strongly supported the Civil Rights Amendment. He even and the Voting Rights Act Amendment. He even supported LBJ. LBJ had an amendment, it wasn't an amendment to the Constitution. It was just a law making firearms. In other words, it was let's get firearms out of children. It was something I can't remember the specifics, but Charlton
Yeah.
Heston even supported that. But it was so he kind of so he was a very he was very supportive of civil rights, and it's kind of interesting to see that and you can see that kind of active in these films that he's choosing, and also the environmental causes of Soylent Green.
Yeah.
You can see that in his choices he's making.
Yeah. And
Um,
we'll get to that in just a
we will
moment.
get to that
One
forthwith.
more thing. The interracial thing.
Right.
I have a note on that now. Island in the Sun in 1957 was the first interracial kiss,
Was the very first interracial.
and then Patch of Blue in 1965. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in 1967,
Of
and then there've
course.
been several other instances.
Right. So yeah, other instances. So yeah, but it really felt it felt like that they had a connection. Even then, she had to overcome kissing Moses
Yeah.
because it really felt like and she was a very good actress. She died. Died. I think she was around 50 when she passed away.
Yeah.
She was in a lot of things. I think won an Emmy after she had just after for her work just before she had passed away, and posthumously won an Emmy. But and the kid was good too. They both remember Charlton Heston fondly.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so many ways to take the work, the interracial relationships in the film. There's some other ways that are not so kind to the film in some respects. Some of the other ways, a lot of different theorists kind of bouncing around, feel like that they look at another line of Charlton Heston's where he says he refers to the blood that he's donating. He says it's Anglo-Saxon blood, 100% Anglo-Saxon blood, which leads to a different kind of connotation that
Yeah.
his purity somehow.
These
But
days, it probably make more of an impact than it did then, though.
yeah, more of an
Yeah.
impact than it. And yet it's trying at the time. It's you obviously it's trying to make. I think they were trying to make some overtly, at least, some kind of progressive ideas about
It's
what's
possible.
getting. Yeah, And the other thing too,
but
though,
it did
I was,
still have kind of a garbled narrative. It's not. I'm not
it's
certain
a
exactly what they wanted to do with this film, other than it's a film with Charlton Heston in it, and he's the last man on earth, kind of. And
and he
so,
picks
and
convertibles, and how about, except for when he wanted to be, it was great at the end when he decides, I'm going full blown colonel. I'm taking my cap off, my army cap off of the chess player opposite me,
yeah,
and I'm going to get in a jeep this time. And go. But
yeah,
one last thing before too, where it's not muddled. It is definitely pro science, and it's so interesting
absolutely, yeah,
in, and to interpret these films 30 years later, 50 years later, actually, to interpret these films, that just stands out as a beacon, of a beacon of the renaissance of knowledge, of being a champion of knowledge. Of course, the problem with science was that it had led us to the chemical warfare. But
yes.
on the other hand, he's so strong with his science. I found that refreshing in these times. How about you, Professor B?
Well, I think it speaks for itself. But there's one other thing that I thought
Yeah,
that's it's kind of off. But this him watching Woodstock
right.
in the film gave Joel Hodgson the idea to do Mystery Science Theater.
No, that
Yes,
is incredible. That
yes,
is absolutely. I love that scene, and they get it so right that he has to, I love that he comes up with held over for 3 years Woodstock, and because it's the only film in town, he has taken the trouble to run it as his own projectionist. He
yeah,
fires up a generator to get the projector going, gets the projector going, and as an old projectionist, movie projectionists, they get everything right. They open the arc carbon chamber. That's where the light is. And you can
right,
actually see the welding rods. It's like a positive and negative rod. And between those, in the distance between those rods, you got that gigantic spark of electricity that's lighting up.
yeah.
You get it, and
Now, a
and
friend
they
of
did
mine
not
used
use
to
it
be a friend of mine used to be a projectionist at a drive-in, and
right.
and he said you could tell by the sound of it whether it was adjusted right. Was that true?
So whether it was what now?
You could tell if it was set right, the arcs were set right by the sound they made.
Oh, you could. My boss, he liked a good bright screen, but I remember sometimes you'd forget to change the arc carbons, and in that case, you got to make them last. They got to last usually, 20 minutes. Each giant reel of film is 20 minutes,
Right.
or 18. And sometimes I remember, oh, I forgot to change carbons, and so you'd separate them. And of course, it might get a little dimmer. I hated that for the audience, but on the other hand, it beat losing the light, with like a minute left in that reel. That was it.
That would
But
explain one of the theaters I went to as a kid. Everything was dark. I think they were just trying to save the money.
save money on those arc carbons because you were constantly changing them out. They burned, and that arc between the carbons made the incredibly bright light. And Charlton Heston got that totally right. But that was the one other thing we were talking about too. With one more thing with the kind of science is because there's an interesting mix of science and religion. And so I think in science fiction films, we've been talking about this all the way through the blending of science and religion. There's the like Day the Earth Stood Still, with Klaatu being like a Christ type of figure. And
Yeah.
here at the end of this film, you definitely have Charlton Heston, the sacrifice. They've taken the last vial of his blood that can cure everything. Thank goodness it's preserved. I kept seeing there in was it in the same film where they almost no, that's different film where they drop this bottle of wine and it breaks. I'm thinking he's got to get this last vial where he's
Yeah.
just about dead in the fountain, very much in a crucifix. Um, um, the way he looks, his body is laid out like he's being crucified, and they've got to get that last vial out to the last survivors. And so, but it's an interesting connection. It's kind of like you have the sacrifice of humanity, and yet it's interwoven. And with Charlton Heston's constantly playing a sacrificial figure, Moses, he's constantly playing kind of a
Yeah.
sacrificial figure mixed in with science. and somehow, maybe on a deeper level, we leave the theater thinking they can somehow work together and not be anti-science at the same time. We're not, and the film is definitely does not have an anti-science message.
Yeah, it's a shame that so many films have had this problem of saying that religion is anti-science and science is anti-religion, which isn't really true. But
That's correct.
it sometimes simplification for purposes of entertainment just kind of glosses over that kind of stuff.
That's a good point. That's it. Yeah, they can completely coexist. And a lot of great scientists were very religious, and
Yeah,
so this is interesting. That's kind of, yeah. I like the way you put that. This film is finding a way to weave these things together.
yeah.
Whereas, yeah, yeah. But I that struck me. It's just the science message was amazing, and just any it's funny. You think about the kind of the character types in the films, and we're fixing to go. I know, to go to Soylent Green. How about an was there a mentor in this film for Charlton Heston? And I'm not sure if there was, unless it's
I don't think
Rosalind.
so.
No, that's
No, no,
interesting.
I don't believe
The old man.
he was the last person on Earth, and so he just he wings it basically, and somehow is able to be kind of the hero despite himself.
Despite him, and despite which he kind of knows he's that way in a sense, because the biggest TV monitor in his own apartment, you're thinking, why do you have a monitor of yourself? I mean, normally monitors are showing, especially at that time, it was so cool. In Mission Impossible episodes, when you'd have several monitors, and you're seeing different things on the monitors, like different, that makes sense. He's got the surveillance on his own apartment, but the biggest monitor is just his own living room. I mean, it's just a mirror, basically. But
Essentially. And
yeah,
something that I notice about this, because I worked in television for a period of time, and
right,
if you go into a television control room that had all kinds of monitors, in the old days, of course, I mean, these days it's all digital, but in the old days they would have all CRT monitors all around you, and the whine
right,
of that could get to you after a while. Those
right,
rooms are usually
right,
very quiet because the audio was controlled in a different area. They'd have the audio guy in a booth
right,
making sure the audio is right, and so in the video control, everything was quiet except for the whine of all these screens. And there's
right.
usually about 50 of them, and that's what made me think about that. It has nothing to do with anything except that it's something
Apparently,
that I remember.
well, and speaking of those monitors too, you could always tell the difference between sometimes. Now this film, I'm thinking maybe I wonder if they rotoscoped out those views. They did it beautifully. Sometimes other films, when they show a monitor, you get the rolling bars, and you can always
Yeah,
tell a lower budget film when they don't fix the rolling bars, which takes a lot of work to match up the frame rate with 24 frames per second.
I think they
Uh,
matted it. I think
I
it was
think
a
they
matte
matted it
shot.
too. I do too. I think they did in that shot. Yeah, the other thing with special effects, I did look that up. The boy, those were some of the best eyes. That was incredible. The
Oh
makeup
yeah,
was fantastic. Yeah, and I wonder. I'm thinking that did cause a fair amount of pain on the actors. I just can't imagine that.
probably did.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm keep talking. I'm going to see if I can find out how much it cost to make this film.
Oh, right. But yeah, the contact lenses. That's one of the best jobs in the film I've ever seen. And when oh God, this is a plot spoiler. Oh, for Rosalind Cash, and they set it up beautifully. They said the plague can take you over in a flash, in an instant, or it can take months before you turn into one of the family, the mutated people. And Rosalind Cash gets taken over instantly. And when you have this feeling that it's going to happen, and when she takes off her glasses, that is a terrific reveal. So this director, even though he hadn't done necessarily a lot of, some other films that you can easily think of, he did a great job. I mean, the beats, everything plays fine. It just is suspenseful. I didn't think anything really lagged. It just plays out beautifully. And it's interesting too. Another thing he let play out. Anytime they see the calendar 1975,
Yeah,
it just it sends their memory back. The old they can just,
Right.
where were they in that moment?
Well, they figure from the dialogue that the present year is 1977. So he's
Yes,
been a couple of years since society fell apart, and
right.
that's why Woodstock was still playing.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. That's why Woodstock would have still been playing, and it was
it
perfect for their
cost a little
cars.
over eight. It cost a little over $8 million to make the film. I didn't see what the box office was on it, but that
Wow,
would
that's
be
not
it would
bad
be
for.
no. I mean, that would be a fairly low budget in today's terms. I mean, that's what
Exactly.
25 million or something like that in
Yeah,
today's
exactly.
dollars.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's exactly right. And yeah, so Charlton Heston gets 3 million, and then the rest of the movie is 5 million. So I mean,
Yeah.
and I also thought this was really clever on their part too, because all the brand new cars were used cars. He goes to find, we never see a 1977 car that they would have had to redesign.
Yeah,
Like
that's true.
he just gets these great Mustangs from the.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk. Let's talk about Soylent Green now.
You
And
got it.
this is. I love this film because of the fact that Edward G. Robinson is in it. Now we talked about this when we were talking about um, um, Key Largo, where
Right.
he played for once he's playing a cop instead of a criminal, and his nuance on this is incredible. This is probably the best performance he's ever given in his life, and of course there's good reason for it, which we'll get into later.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Best performance ever. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
He's the wise old man mentor in this film. This
that's
film,
true.
and he
That's
just
very true.
plays it beautifully. Oh,
But a great
just
cast in this. They had Chuck Connors. They had Joseph Cotton, who was on by 12 seconds, and then that was it. Brock Peters, who plays his boss. We have once again Lincoln Kilpatrick, who plays a priest,
right.
as in the previous film. We have Whit Bissell, who is one of these people who you don't know who he is, but you've seen him in absolutely every television show between 1957 and 1990, and usually playing some kind of official.
He's
And
and a very kindly,
yeah,
very
kindly looking
kindly.
guy. Yeah,
Yeah, he's not going to carry the movie. He's just going to help make a scene. I remember he is the kindly gentleman, I believe, who sits beside Ada Quonset in 1968 in Airport, in the very first
yes,
Airport film with
he
Burt
was best known.
Lancaster.
He was best known as the general in the time tunnel. And
I'll be doing right. That makes sense.
all he did was stand there and say, "What are your readings now?" And that was okay.
But of course, Professor B, our listeners on the Oldest Nerd will know him as the manager of Space Station K7 in
That's
the
true.
Trouble with Tribbles.
Yes.
And that's basically a common role for him, to be kind of an intermediary, a kind of jovial, friendly. He's trying to work to make things right, but he's not. He's just a kindly person. In this film, it's the only time I've ever seen him cast as Machiavellian, behind the scenes owner of the Soylent Green Company. That was no. He's
Yeah.
running for governor. He's running for governor, and he doesn't want to know too much. He knows things. He knows Soylent Green is bad, but don't say anymore. I don't want to know
Yeah.
anymore.
And Dick Van Patten is in this. I don't know why,
Nick Van,
but he would
no,
be a bigger name later on, but everybody had to start somewhere, I guess.
everybody, and yet he still looks like he's maybe 40 years old.
Yeah.
He does not look like. I hate to say it. He just kind of, different people are like that, and he's looks like a
Yeah.
40-year-old attendant. At
It's
least.
something we've talked about before is that if you're a character actor, you'll work all your life.
That's exactly right. Yes, you will. And I love character. Oh,
Yeah.
they are. Oh God, yeah. Fritz Weaver and Donald Moffat are two of my favorite
Yeah.
character actors. Neither one in this film, but oh, it's got. Oh, and the other one we talked about was Cecilia Lovejoy. Was that Love Sky? I'm not.
Yes.
she is the leader of this fascinating. We talked about both films with their world building. The world
Right.
building in the Omega Man is a little more loosey goosey, little confusing. This one has got some excellent world building. This idea of an exchange, of like a
Yeah.
knowledge book exchange in an old library, that obviously has got to be well hidden. Otherwise, people
Yeah.
people are sleeping everywhere. There are 40 million people in New York,
Right.
and so people are sleep. I love the way Charlie. You gotta everybody. Maybe you develop. How do I walk up these staircase? You just carefully know how to not step on heads and hands, because Heston's great at it. Because there's so many people that are sleeping on stairways. It's just,
Yeah.
but yet the knowledge exchange is protected. What was your idea on the knowledge exchange, Professor B? Is it its purpose? Is it, did that need a little more clarity, or did that come across pretty well for you?
Well, there was no real offices. I mean, the Charlton Heston worked from basically a telephone box,
Right.
and which I liked. It was a cordless phone, and I thought, wow, what an idea. Which
Me too.
now
Yeah.
who cares? But I mean, at that time, that was big technology,
Oh, I
and
remember when we got our first one.
the police book, which was the person who would normally take the place of a computer or a research department, and then they just have it all centralized. He can go
That's
and
right.
borrow stuff at the exchange, and then come home and read as long as he could ride the bicycle on to keep the light running.
Oh my goodness, Zach, I forgot about. Yes, he's riding the bicycle, and so basically has a book, but he's also like a book. I kind of gathered,
Yeah,
every good policeman.
he's
Maybe I'm
memorized a
wrong
lot
on
of
this,
stuff.
but
Yeah,
yeah, you've got to have a person that you've got to have a good contact that coordinates this information, takes this information, go to the exchange, makes the connections, and that basically is like your internet. That's like your.
essentially, yeah.
Yeah, that's your research work, and it all kind of emanates. The key place is the Central Exchange. What was the name of that place? I wrote it. It's the exchange anyway, and
Yeah, I think they just call it the exchange. Yeah,
it's like the holiest of holies are up there, and then of course they valued that book that Charlton Heston gets from the apartment that he goes
right.
to.
From the guy that was murdered. Yeah,
Yeah, on which of course connects to plankton in the was it plankton in the sea?
it was plankton that supposedly Soylent Green was made out of. Yeah.
Right. Every time I hear plankton, I go to Logan's Run.
I love the thing
Drinking
where
from
they're
the
going to the apartment and he's doing his investigation, and they have the women that are laying around, they call furniture, because
furniture
this guy is a rich person, and the women came with the apartment.
with the
and
apartment. It's
and
awful.
and
Yeah.
he takes a cigarette from one of them, takes a puff, and he said, if I had the money, I'd have one or two of these a day.
And that is a brilliant part of the world build. Not necessarily. I mean, the furniture is horrible. What we've
Yeah, it
extrapolated,
is.
women have become completely objectified, and just their furniture in an apartment, and they stay with the. It's amazing. But it's the world building of the time. They had thought it through, and the
Yeah.
wealthy had this.
Yeah,
And
he
I
takes a
love the
jar
way.
of jelly, which you wouldn't have anywhere else, and they show rich person that's buying from a butcher shop, and the butcher gives this real rank looking piece of meat, and this will be 50 D's and 37 cents, but I'll give it to you for 50 D's. And I thought, wow, what a discount!
What a
But
discount! What and the and I
but
love the way you got to kind of go along with the Charlton Heston character. He will basically, if he's going to a wealthy apartment and the chance is there, he grabs the silk pillowcase and just stuffs it with
yes,
all the stuff he can take. From the best thing he gets is the research. Well, it's a reference book, kind of like the first.
yeah,
What was the reference book you mentioned for film? Anyway,
Hallowell's, yeah,
yeah, Hallowell, giant reference book, which totally is going to tie into the movie. There you go.
huge thing, and too big to read anymore.
That's awesome. Well, he would have gotten that and taken that to
Right,
Edward T.
right.
Robinson. That's it. But he gets the ones on the sea, And then he also gets, oh, what else? He got I got apples and fruit and meat. He got some meat for them to make.
And there was a
Yeah.
jar of jelly. It was a big deal. It was a clue as well as something they enjoyed. It was like half a jar of jelly, and it was like something he'd never tasted before, and that Edward G. Robinson, tells him about. He's kind of the window on the past, in addition to being kind of the knowledge base for his investigation.
That's exactly right. That's
Oh, something
exactly
else I
that.
wanted to something else I wanted to
Yeah.
mention. Forgot to mention this, that we talked about in the Omega Man. They used just an abandoned part of Los Angeles in order to film, and this one in Soylent Green, which is supposedly further into the future, they used the back lot at Warner Brothers, and instead of matting in the tops of the buildings, they left them like they were with the riggings and things to make it look like they were buildings that were falling apart.
Oh, that totally makes sense because I didn't even for the riot, that riot scene, the food riot.
Any of the outside scenes that they had were all done on the Warner Brothers lot for their New York sets. And when
Right.
they'd shoot a long shot, they'd just go ahead and show the top of the sets because they
Yeah.
looked like they were buildings that had decayed.
And I totally bought it. I mean, I didn't even think about where this was. It just felt like a teeming New York City that's hot and greenish, and that they use a green filter to make everything give it a little tint of green, and humidity and heat, and you just buy it. And the tractors that they use to dump people, the stuntmen I think there was a mixture. They might have had a couple of models of those tractor that I wasn't sure how I have not researched the special effects,
Yeah.
but but they didn't use models that often. If they did, it was models of the tractors. But
Yes.
that was fantastic stunt work. The what do they? Do you remember what they call those tractors again? They said because they warned the people. This is the police. They say the tractors are coming or something.
I don't remember. I don't
Yeah,
remember. And
but
I was wrong about that. It's not Warner Brothers. It was MGM.
oh,
And
that's right.
MGM had the great backlot, and this was the last film to have used it because they tore it down a year later.
I'll be darned.
They
Is it
sold it
perfect?
off, and they put condos on it, and
Wow.
it's the area that none of the old movie theaters, none of the old movie companies kept their backlots because the real estate became too
Right.
valuable, and so they could do location with smaller cameras and things like this. So this was one of the big. This was one of the last of the big backlot shoots.
and by the 70s, people were expecting real location shooting.
Yeah.
The film had to have more of an authenticity to it. But
Yes.
there were still a lot of good films that used backlocks and they still looked authentic. And so this would have been this totally works for this film. And even the crowd control, it was so well thought out that when they have the crowd control cops, riot police, they wear the football helmets. You could tell this is going to happen. A riot may happen. It's building up. It's not. It's happened before. Food riots, when people are trying to get to these little Soylent capsules, the Soylent little bars that they eat,
Yeah.
um, and because they're hungry, they're starving, and then they have the crowd control. That's happened before. They're used to it, and it's amazing the way they dump the people in the trucks, and the dump trucks is kind of scary, and
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, just well done. Yeah, and then there's a sniper in that same scene, that's trying to kill Charles Heston because he knows too much. They're worried. And this film I thought did a good job. We're talking about films that have a conspiracy,
Yeah.
and sometimes if the conspiracy is too quickly found out, um, as a conspiracy movie lover, I want those extra layers, and this film felt like it had enough of those extra layers. You still found out,
Oh yeah.
if there's not some giant turn that Whit Bissell turns out to be a wonderful guy, but still, it's got enough layers, and then of course the people with the power that want to keep the secret of Soylent Green are killing off everybody in connection, and a nice layer of mystery, like Joseph Cotton. when he knows the secret he knows is so morally corrupt, he even says, I'm prepared to die. I am ready to die. And that's
Yeah.
a real mystery because and Charlton Heston saying there's no sign of struggle here. This was an assassination, and he didn't even try to fight it. And we are privy as an audience to see what happens.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's kind of strange at the time. You're going, why didn't he fight? He says, I'm ready to die. And then in the worst death, he's just going to be crowbarred to death.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. You know,
Let's run back. Let's run back. You were talking about Heston filling his pillowcase with food, and what he does
yes,
is he brings it in the next scene. He brings it back. He and his book live together in a tiny little apartment,
right.
and so he and Edward G. Robinson share this meal together. It was all ad libbed. That was
No.
yes. Richard Fleischer, the director, said, "Why don't you just act like people who've never had good food before and have this?" And so Robinson is instructing him how to eat with table manners. And you know
Of course.
and what this is and how you eat it and what you eat it with, that kind of thing, which you know is completely foreign to Heston's character in this. So it was a brilliant scene and ad libbed.
That's fantastic. And it is a quiet scene. It's ad lib, but it's quiet. You're actually interested in the food. By that time in the film, seeing the world they live in, you are really hungry. You're looking at that. You're starting, it's interesting. You're starting to appreciate what we already have. And that's part of the point of the film too, in its ecological message, is
Yeah.
to make us appreciate. Edward G. Robinson is that book of the past, that knowledge. But that knowledge he has is the knowledge that we live. It's our life that we go through that he's
Yes.
remembering well. It makes you appreciate what we have before we blow it all up.
All the
before,
way to his last scene where he's dying and he's in the room and they're playing Beethoven and some other classical music, and then they show scenes of woods and lakes and things
right.
which Heston has never seen before.
Oh,
And
and that and his friend and his book. You're right. It's interesting. Another name where a person has is a name for a person that's just a functional thing, like a book or furniture. And so his book, his best friend too, is dying. The
yeah,
way they say they love each other in that scene is just beautiful. And you know,
and
because
there
you
was
can
a lot of
see
truth to it. In fact, Edward G. Robinson had cancer, I
oh
think bladder cancer,
right.
and he
Oh
knew he didn't have
God.
long to live. And in fact, he died 10 days after the film wrapped.
Right.
And so, but he didn't tell anybody on the crew except for Heston. Heston knew that, and
Right.
Heston brought him a variety of wines and cheeses from all over the world every day that he was on set.
Oh, ho, ho, ho. Which really kind of there's so much about that movie is
Yeah,
where art meets life, it's just
absolutely is. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and for Edward and I gather Edward G. Robinson, as skinny as he was, especially at that film, he would have appreciated, and especially in that time of his life, appreciated those wines and cheeses, and of course his whole part is constantly appreciating what what we have. He's
it
remembering.
it said
And
something about the person because he was someone who was. He collected art. He was a very refined individual, despite the fact that he always played underworld characters in
right,
most of his better known movies. And I had a collection of old radio shows, and one of them was a Jack Benny show where it's one of Jack Benny's very early shows where he just does a monologue and they play music.
right.
And he noticed that Edward G. Robinson was in the audience and calls him up. And the two of them ad lib for 3 or 4 minutes. And it was a completely different Edward G. Robinson that I'd ever heard before in any movie that he was in. And he was this was still around 1930 or so. He's probably just been in his first movie. What is it? Public Enemy or
Scarface.
something like that. Public Enemy,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah,
And
yeah. No, no,
and
you're right.
so
You're right.
and Jack called him Eddie, and he was and they chatted and did, they didn't really do any comedy. They just talked to each other for a moment, and it was something to hear. But I divert from what we're talking about here. But
Oh, I love it though. That is, I would love to hear that
but
someday.
in knowing what was going on in that scene where he's dying and Heston is crying, I believe that probably was Heston's best acting job, and he probably wasn't acting that much.
I agree. That is, it's just touches you. And you're also, again, you're also looking at what, what we have that we're just throwing away.
Yeah,
But yeah, it added and even more importantly, though, its best friend is passing away, and they really were best friends in the film. It was a terrific, oh yeah, fantastic, that film. I mean, yeah, it's interesting, the reviews we've seen for the film. They're anywhere from, pretty good. You'll get people saying it's 3 stars out of 4, three, and then you get some people saying it's 1, and you just don't. I think both these films have aged incredibly well. Oh, one thing that caught me too, that I wanted, that I was doing a little research on, was and but how this film has got to be one of the first films to ever mention the greenhouse effect. I mean, and this is
yeah,
1973,
yes,
and and we in the 1990s. I remember the greenhouse effect in Nala, that coming
yeah,
into conversation, but not in 1973. And then they even put a green filter, and they play it right. I mean, they get the greenhouse right effect right the entire. There's a line of Charlton Heston's that says it's 90 degrees in New York all the time, and they got that exactly right. It's always hot. There's always sweat in the characters. But they're basically, winter is gone. It's 90 degrees all the time, and that's just an amazing.
it's interesting because that science wasn't even existent at that point that I know of, that was well enough known by the public. Now, there was always a talk of overpopulation in the late
Right.
'60s,
That's
especially.
right.
There was
That
a
was the
book that
biggest
came
thing.
out called "The Population Bomb." We were going to populate ourselves until there were 40 million people in New York. Turns out there's only 8. We did actually take some steps to limit population growth, and that seemed to have slowed down that kind of thing. But
But
the
yeah,
idea of the hot city, perhaps because so many people are in it, I don't know, or the oceans are dead. They didn't really explain why that was. They didn't say it was any chemical warfare or nuclear thing. It was just as a result of so many people being here, I guess.
and air pollution. In the montage at the beginning. This
Okay.
film had an incredible montage at the beginning of the film. You see these kind of, you start off watching it, and am I watching the right film? It's got these, like a picture of old people from West Virginia on a in a
Yeah.
cabin, and then it's like people just, and then it becomes people, cars, and then you start to see the pollution.
Yeah.
But the, I think our earliest I've heard I was in the research, apparently even in the 1850s, some scientists had started to think about the possibility of excess carbon dioxide causing a greenhouse effect. One of them was the designer. I think I got to go back and do more reading, but the arboretum, the giant glass house that they made in, I was at London for, I think, one of the world's fairs. They make this. It's
Yeah.
still around. Glass, and he realized inside, with all these plants and the glass coming through, he started to make the connection that of kind of a greenhouse effect, that
Yeah.
we can create the warmth and humidity. Then I know somebody connected it in the late 50s to CO2 and oil, and then but still we didn't hear about that to the 90s. When you think about it, but we were concerned about air pollution in the late
Yes.
60s and 70s, and but it was more like that it was going to choke us, the choking air pollution, not a greenhouse effect. So where this film got that is amazing, but they got it spot on right, and then they play it outright. It's so hot all the time in New York. They mention it's 90 degrees all the time. He loves coming. You turn the air conditioner down as far as you can. I mean, you get this sense of oppressive heat that's just amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Well,
yeah,
this was Nixon's first term in when this film was made, and I think
right.
that one of his one of his things was to cut down on pollution. A
That's
lot
true. That is exactly right.
of pollution legislation came out about the time
EPA
that he was
started.
in office. Yeah.
Right. That's it. That's a
So,
fascinating, yeah. And
yeah.
yeah, that is a fascinating connection with Nixon. And
Yeah.
Heston in his life, he pivots over to supporting Nixon in 68 and probably 72, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But he was a real mix a real nuanced mix of different beliefs Heston had, and
Yeah.
and and a personal level, I think people loved working with him. That's what I have inferred from actors that they've enjoyed working with him. Apparently, very kind on the set too, and I'm sure.
Well, that was mentioned by his co-star in the Omega Man. She was
Right.
scared to be acting with Moses, and he said, "I was nervous when I was making Ben Hur." So I mean, he treated it with gentle humor and was very cognizant of bringing things along. And obviously, the respect that he showed to Edward G. Robinson in this film says just volumes about the kind
Oh,
of person he was.
just fun. And I like, what Brock Peters as his boss, I thought was terrific. He does
Yeah.
that's an,
Here's another
and
character actor who's been in half a dozen things that we've seen and stands out in all of them.
and it's a good, again, world building. I every time you go to the police station, it felt right. It felt, and you've got a really interesting nuance. Yeah, Charlton Heston, his office is like you said, with a wireless phone on a street corner is his office. You go in through all the people to Brock Peters's office, which is crowded still, but he's got his own office like a cop would. But there's still enough nuances, differences to say this is the world 50 years in the future from when the film was made, and things have changed. I think they're trying to imply that this world is going to have more diversity, and we handle diversity in more of a just matter of fact sort of way. Brock Peters, and I love the way Brock Peters he's the boss, and I love the way he makes an arc to at the end to where he comes through, and instead of being bought off fully by the Soylent Green Corporation, which could easily mean the end of your life, he comes around and helps Charlton Heston at the end of the film. Um, that's and the character who might have surprised somebody from watching it in the 60s would have been Chuck Connors, the where he played such a branded. He
Yeah.
played and what was the other film he was in, that the TV series that we played
The
the father,
Rifleman.
of course, the rifleman, and such a kind, he does the right thing all the time. He is a hired killer in this film. He is cold and whew, would have might have caused a little bit of surprise for you as a viewer back in 1973, but it does the part really well. And but the world building it's well done. Trying to think of even to the point of the food. They've introduced this new form of Soylent Green,
Yeah.
and then the scene in the factory was fantastic at the end of the
Yeah.
film.
Yeah, it was an Exxon, it was a excuse me, a Chevron refinery that they used
No,
as the yes.
that's amazing to make helping with the greenhouse effect in the sense that it's making green soy and green. It's a refinery. That's amazing. And yeah, and they integrate it together beautifully. The conveyor belts of bodies when they go into the water, it was, oh
Yeah.
wow. And then the next thing Heston sees is the conveyor belt full of the little cubes, and wow, Soylent Green is people. Just
Yeah. Yeah. That's got to be one of the standout lines of, I would say, one of the top 100 standout lines of the movies.
and
Soylent
that's
Green
what
is made out of people.
and you can see Edward G. Robinson mouth that. I love that
Yeah.
when apparently there's a part when this your relatives can come by and watch you die in when you've purchased this beautiful 20 minutes of death experience for people that just want to fade away from this world. They're older and they just want to going home, and so they go to this big company at this big building. It looks like a coliseum almost. And it's funny, it doesn't advertise outside of it, but you know to go in, and you go
Yeah.
inside, you pay for your 20 minutes death experience, and apparently there's a time when you can talk, and the people can talk to you. But just when Edward G. Robinson is trying to, the secret that made him want to die was knowing that Soylent Green is people. It's so soul killing. He just wants to give up. So, but he's having trouble at that time. The mic is having trouble, and it reminded me of important times in a lot of films or podcasts or whatever. Just when the critical time, that's when you get your interference somehow, and so the static
Yeah.
interference. So they have to plug in a headphone, and only Charlton Heston can hear and we
Right.
see Edward G. Robinson mouth, "Soylent Green is people."
It is interesting. Another little point that I didn't know:
Yeah.
Edward G. Robinson, by the time this film was made, was just about deaf, and
Yeah.
so he could not hear any of the stage directions, and
No.
couldn't hear what anybody was saying unless they were just right in his ear. And so
Right.
it took several takes on just about everything where he was having conversations to be
Oh,
able to get the right rhythms in
right.
order to make it sound like he could hear what they were saying, rather than just saying his line when he was cued. And even when they yelled cut, he would just keep going. And so,
They might have. I wonder if Richard Fleischer would have just kept the camera going at that point. Might got some extra ad lib type stuff. That
I don't see anything here about that, but I can't imagine that he didn't use some of it. That
yeah.
was the other thing. There were other tragedies in here. The head of the exchange, which you talked about, she died something like less than a month after this film wrapped, and
Oh.
also Richard Fleischer's father, Max Fleischer, the animator, died during filming, and they had to stop production for a couple of days for him to go to the funeral for his father, and that was the Max Fleischer who had done the old Popeye cartoons and the old Betty Boop cartoons. These were all classic things that the Max Fleischer and his brother Dave did.
Wow, that's fascinating. That was speaking. Okay, and Richard Fleischer. Yes, he did. He did Tora Tora Tora.
Yeah.
That's the fantastic film about the attack on Pearl Harbor with Joseph Cotton,
Mm-hmm.
and then he did the Boston Strangler, Doctor Doolittle, um, Compulsion. The Vikings is kind of a famous film. Started his films in 1946. Worked 40 years all the way to 1987. He did Red Sonja, Conan the Destroyer. Did some amazing. He did Doctor Doolittle, Fantastic Voyage, against science fiction, efforts. Fantastic Voyage, terrific science fiction film. And another one, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah.
So really accomplished, kind of, could do science fiction, could do world building, kind of a larger budget director, really, really good director. And you were saying his father had passed away during the filming.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that was quite a an emotional roller coaster that they were on while they were making this picture, and yet
A lot of roller coasters.
there's a lot of heart in this picture, despite the fact that it had such a dystopian future done. You kind of have hope for something. I mean, obviously, Heston would have had to have been gunned down right after he was running down the road yelling "Green as people," but they stopped it
Oh,
there.
and you stop it there, and that's one of those great films where the idea of the film is just to get the word out,
Yeah.
just to get the message out. Yeah.
But
Put on.
what I'm encouraged by is just uh, uh, the strength of the acting that was here, that made you believe that there was some hope for people even after they had no hope, and
Right.
people like the Heston's character, and especially Edward G. Robinson's character.
right, that they had some hope, and that's it kind of reminds you of those films where similar films where they some similar well yeah where they like one of those where there's some hope left, and that hope that is left is that one line. And one other film that reminds, and there's others too, like Soylent Green is people, that one line, and the whole point of the movie just to get that message out. What reminds me a little bit of They Live, where put the sunglasses on, and 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 they get that message out through the media. Finally people can see the aliens for what they are. But yeah, kind of it's one of those types of films. In a sense, they both are. The Omega Man also, with just the fact that this little group with their one vial of his blood might be able to go
Yeah.
out. One thing I was interesting back to the Omega Man is there was a couple of deleted scenes in the Omega Man that were really interesting.
Yeah.
For one thing, Rosalind Cash's character ends up being pregnant, and if
Yes.
she ends up making it, then her child, Charlton Heston, that child might. Uh, there's all sorts of ways you could go with that. It could be a bridge, some sort of bridge between
Yes.
the family, or it could be a way to make reinvigorate the entire human race. There's no, but she's pregnant. The other thing that, and again, where Heston doesn't have a sense of empathy with the family, but there's a scene where Rosalind Cash does that was cut. She goes to a cemetery to see where her mother had passed away.
Yes.
And did you read about that too? And
I
she
did.
goes
I
to this.
did.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And she sees a woman that's part of the family, one of the mutants, with the eyes and the mutated
Yeah.
skin. And that woman, I think, is caring for. There's basically a child that she had that is dead, and the woman is may either. I'm trying to remember this deleted scene. I have not seen it. I've just read a description of it. But
Yeah.
the woman is caring for this body of this child, and Rosalind Cash then gets this sense of empathy for the family, for the mutants, and realizes that they have emotions too. They have feelings also.
Yeah.
They have deep cares. And then the second deleted scene is she explains this to Charlton Heston. That she's got a little different point of view about the mutants in the family. Did you find something on that, or
Um, no,
uh,
there's a number of uh, alternate scenes that they had. For instance, conversations that happen in different places, from the apartment to the top of the roof with a water tank and a 50 caliber machine gun. I'm not sure exactly.
yeah, kind of smaller?
What?
But those two
Yeah.
scenes were really. I wish they'd have left them in, because it would
What
have
I
left
what I
them
find what I find here is that they ask the author of the book I Am Legend, um,
right. Richard Matheson.
Richard Matheson, what he thought of the film, and he said he didn't have much of an opinion about it because it wasn't anything like his book.
Right. I have it's interesting. It's funny how and then he later adapts Ray Bradbury's he does the adaptation of Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles,
Yeah,
which Ray Bradbury wasn't a fan of. And so he's been on both sides. He knows what it is to be adapted, and then he did the work of the adapting. And yeah,
yeah,
he did not like the idea. In his original book, they're vampires, and here they make them mutants, and it is a significant change. Um,
and we could do a whole show on Harlan Ellison about how he doesn't like any of his work ever touched. But
Anything ever, even if it's the best stuff in the world, I hate it
yeah,
anyway.
well, we're gonna have to go. We have talked about Soylent Green and the Omega Man today, and we'll
We've
have
hit the
something.
Harlan Ellison hard stop. When
We
you hit
did.
a
We did.
Harlan,
That's true. Oh my. Okay. Well, thank you, Professor. We will talk to you
oh,
again next week, and we'll have more films to talk about. And in the meantime,
absolutely.
Yeah, meantime, please subscribe and click a like if you will. And we'll be back next week. Until then, don't go far.